Chained mother bear. Drowning in the water. What happened next will shock. You let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun barely peeked through the thick forest canopy as Logan Carter made his way along the riverbank. The 28-year-old wildlife photographer had been camping in these woods for 3 days, hoping to capture images of the local wildlife. The gentle sound of flowing water and chirping birds created a peaceful backdrop as he followed the winding path beside the river. Logan adjusted his camera bag and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. Something felt different about today. The forest seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. He paused, looking out across the shimmering water where mist still clung to the surface. That's when he heard it. A strange, splashing sound, followed by a low, desperate moan that made his skin crawl. Moving cautiously toward the sound, Logan pushed through a cluster of reeds at the water's edge. The sight before him froze him in place. There, about 20 feet from shore, a large brown bear thrashed in the water. Not just any bear, a mother bear with panic in her eyes. Logan could see she wasn't simply swimming. Something was wrong. "What the hell?" he whispered, instinctively raising his camera before lowering it again. The bear's front paws clawed desperately at the water's surface, while her hind quarters remained oddly stationary. Each time she tried to move forward, she jerked back violently. Her eyes bulged with terror as water splashed around her massive body. She was drowning, but something was keeping her from reaching the shore. Logan squinted against the morning light reflecting off the water. That's when he saw it, the glint of metal beneath the surface. Chains. Heavy, rusted chains wrapped around the bear's hind legs, anchoring her to something beneath the water. Someone had deliberately left this animal to die a slow, torturous death. His heart pounded against his ribs. The mother bear let out another moan, softer this time, her strength clearly fading. Her eyes, so full of wild terror, now seemed to look directly at Logan. In that moment, something passed between them, a connection that transcended the natural boundaries between human and wild animal. It was a look that said, "Help me." Behind a fallen log nearby, Logan spotted movement. 2 small bear cubs huddled together, whimpering as they watched their mother struggle. They were too young to understand what was happening, too small to help, and too afraid to approach the water. Their pitiful cries pierced Logan's heart like physical pain. "Oh God," Logan whispered, his mind racing. "What do I do?" He knew approaching a wild bear was dangerous. Approaching a panicking mother bear was practically suicide. But watching her drown while her cubs became orphans seemed infinitely worse. The chains hadn't appeared by accident. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone cruel had condemned this animal and her babies to a terrible fate. Logan looked around frantically, hoping to see another hiker or ranger, but he was alone. The bear's movements were becoming sluggish, her head dipping beneath the surface for longer periods each time. He didn't have much time to decide. With trembling hands, Logan placed his camera bag safely on the shore. The mother bear's eyes never left him as he removed his jacket and boots. What he was about to do went against every wildlife safety rule he'd ever learned, but something deeper than reason was driving him now, something that connected him to the desperate animal before him and the helpless cubs watching their mother's last moments. "Hang on," he whispered, more to himself than to the bear, just hang on. Logan waded into the cold river, the shock of the water stealing his breath momentarily. The rocky riverbed was slippery beneath his feet as he pushed forward, carefully watching the struggling bear. She was tiring quickly now, her massive head barely staying above water. Each labored breath sent ripples across the river's surface. The current wasn't particularly strong here, but it was enough to tug at Logan's legs as he moved deeper. "Easy," he called softly, though he knew the bear couldn't understand his words. "Easy, girl." When he was waist-deep, Logan paused. The mother bear's eyes widened at his approach, a mix of fear and desperation in her gaze. She let out a weak growl, her instinct to protect herself still fighting against her exhaustion. The cubs on the shore whimpered louder, sensing the increasing danger to their mother. Logan had never been this close to a wild bear before. The massive creature's wet fur clung to her body, revealing how thin she actually was beneath her usually imposing bulk. Despite her weakened state, her claws could still tear him open with a single swipe. One wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, and this rescue attempt could cost him his life. "I'm trying to help you," Logan said, his voice shaking. "Please don't kill me for it." He inched closer, now only about 10 feet from the bear. The water reached his chest, making movement more difficult. He could see the chains more clearly now, thick, rusty metal links wrapped tightly around her hind legs, disappearing into the murky depths. Someone had secured her to something heavy on the riverbed. "Who would do this?" Logan muttered, anger rising in his chest. As he carefully moved closer, a sound behind him made Logan turn. On the opposite bank, a man stood watching. He wore camouflage hunting gear and held something in his hand, a rifle. Their eyes met across the water, and the man's face twisted into an expression of rage. "Get away from my bear!" the man shouted, raising his rifle. Logan froze, his heart hammering in his chest. "Your bear? You did this? That thieving animal's been stealing my livestock for months," the man spat. "She broke into my barn last week and killed 2 of my goats. I'm teaching her a lesson. By drowning her and orphaning her cubs?" Logan couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. "That's not justice, that's cruelty." The hunter's eyes darted to the shore where the cubs huddled. Something flickered across his face. Doubt, perhaps, or shame, but it quickly hardened back into anger. "Mind your own business, boy," he growled, aiming the rifle more deliberately. "Walk away now, and I won't have to explain to the rangers why I had to shoot a trespasser." Logan's mind raced. The bear was fading quickly behind him, her movements becoming more sluggish by the second. The cubs continued to cry on the shoreline. The hunter stood firm, rifle trained on Logan. Time was running out. "I can't do that," Logan said, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. "I'm not leaving her to die." The hunter's finger moved to the trigger. Last warning. In that moment, the mother bear let out a particularly pained groan and slipped further into the water. Only her nose and eyes remained visible above the surface. The sound seemed to distract the hunter, his gaze shifting briefly to the drowning animal. Logan seized the opportunity, diving beneath the water's surface. The river was murky, visibility limited to just a few feet. Logan could make out the bear's massive form thrashing weakly, the chains stretching down to something on the riverbed. Following the links with his hands, Logan discovered they were attached to an old engine block, deliberately placed to keep the bear anchored until she drowned. His lungs burning for air, Logan surfaced beside the bear, gasping. The hunter was shouting from the shore, but his words were lost in the sound of splashing water. The mother bear's eyes were barely open now, her struggle weakening. Logan took a deep breath and dove again. He had nothing to cut the chains with, no tools to break the links. His only hope was to somehow dislodge the engine block. Wrapping his hands around the cold metal chains, Logan pulled with all his might. His muscles strained against the weight, his feet struggling to find purchase on the slippery riverbed. The chain didn't budge. Logan's lungs screamed for air. He kicked off from the bottom, breaking the surface with a desperate gasp. The hunter had moved closer along the bank, still aiming his rifle. "You're a fool," the hunter called. "That bear would tear you apart if she had the strength." "Maybe," Logan shot back. "But at least I'd die knowing I was better than someone who chains animals to drown." Something dark flashed across the hunter's face. He lowered his rifle slightly, confusion replacing his anger. "What did you say?" "I said you're a coward," Logan replied, treading water beside the barely conscious bear. "A real hunter respects nature. He doesn't torture it." The hunter stared at Logan, then at the struggling bear and her cubs. For a moment, no one moved. Then, to Logan's shock, the hunter lowered his rifle completely. "My father taught me to hunt," he said, his voice suddenly quieter. "He always said a clean kill was the only honorable way, this ... He gestured toward the chained bear. "This isn't what he would have wanted." "Then help me," Logan urged. "Help me free her before it's too late." The hunter seemed to struggle with himself. Decades of anger at predators fighting against something deeper. Something his father had instilled in him long ago. After what seemed like an eternity, he slung his rifle over his shoulder. "There's a key to the lock," he admitted. "And I've got bolt cutters in my truck." Relief flooded through Logan, but it was short-lived. The mother bear had stopped moving, her massive body floating limply in the water. "Hurry!" Logan shouted. "I think she's dying." The hunter disappeared into the trees, presumably heading for his vehicle. Logan moved closer to the bear, gently lifting her head to keep her nose above water. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and irregular. "Stay with me," he pleaded, supporting her massive head against his shoulder. "Your cubs need you. Just stay with me." The minutes stretched endlessly as Logan struggled to keep the bear's airway clear. His arms and legs ached from the effort in the cold water. The cubs continued their pitiful crying from the shore, sensing their mother's fading life force. Just when Logan thought his strength would give out, crashing footsteps announced the hunter's return. He splashed into the water, bolt cutters in hand. "Move aside," the hunter ordered, wading toward them. Logan carefully shifted away while still supporting the bear's head. The hunter took a deep breath and dove beneath the surface. Seconds ticked by. The bear's breathing grew more labored. Logan silently urged the hunter to hurry. With a splash, the hunter resurfaced, gasping for air. "The chain's too thick for the cutters," he panted. "But I found the lock. Give me the key." He fumbled in his pocket and produced a small key, then disappeared beneath the water again. Logan held his breath, not daring to hope. The mother bear's body had gone completely still now, only the slightest rise and fall of her chest indicating she was still alive. Another splash, and the hunter emerged again. "Got it!" he exclaimed. "The lock's open. Help me pull the chain free." Together, they worked to unwrap the heavy chains from the bear's hind legs. As the last link fell away, the mother bear remained motionless, floating limply in the water. "We need to get her to shore," Logan said urgently. "She's not going to make it much longer." The hunter nodded grimly. "On 3, we both push. 1, 2, 3. They strained against the bear's enormous weight, slowly guiding her toward the shallower water. The cubs watched from the shoreline, their cries growing more frantic as they saw their mother's limp form approaching. When they reached the shallows, Logan and the hunter dragged the bear onto the muddy bank. She lay motionless, water streaming from her fur. The cubs approached cautiously, nudging their mother's face with their small snouts. There was no response. Is she? Logan couldn't finish the question. The hunter knelt beside the bear, placing a hand near her nose. She's breathing, but barely. I don't know if she'll make it. Logan looked around desperately. We need to warm her up, and she needs CPR or something. CPR? On a bear? The hunter shook his head. I wouldn't even know where to start. As they debated what to do next, a small sound caught their attention. One of the cubs had climbed onto its mother's chest and was patting her face insistently, making soft whining noises. The other cub joined in, both of them nuzzling and prodding their mother as if trying to wake her. They're trying to revive her, Logan whispered in awe. The hunter watched in silence, his weathered face showing a complex mix of emotions. His hands, which had so recently chained this animal to die, now clenched helplessly at his sides. Suddenly, the mother bear's body convulsed. Water spurted from her mouth as she coughed violently, her massive chest heaving. The cubs scrambled back, startled but excited. Logan and the hunter retreated several steps, knowing that a reviving bear would be disoriented and dangerous. The mother bear's eyes fluttered open. She lay still for several moments, as if gathering her strength. Then, with obvious effort, she rolled onto her stomach. The cubs immediately rushed to her side, pressing against her wet fur. She acknowledged them with a gentle huff, nuzzling each one briefly. Then her gaze found Logan and the hunter. Time seemed to stop as the bear stared at them. There was no way to know what thoughts passed behind those intelligent eyes. Gratitude, confusion, lingering fear, or perhaps the natural wariness of humans that all wild animals possess. Whatever she felt, she made no move to attack. She simply watched them, her breath coming in ragged pants as her body recovered from its ordeal. "We should go," the hunter said quietly. "Give her space." Logan nodded, unable to tear his gaze from the bear's eyes. Something profound had passed between them in the water, a connection he couldn't explain but would never forget. As they slowly backed away, the mother bear struggled to her feet. She swayed unsteadily, clearly exhausted but determinedly standing. The cubs pranced around her legs, overjoyed at her recovery. With one final look at the humans who had both endangered and saved her, she turned and limped slowly into the protective cover of the forest, her cubs following closely behind. When they had disappeared from view, Logan turned to the hunter. "Why did you change your mind?" The hunter stared at the empty space where the bear family had vanished. "My father used to say that how we treat animals shows who we really are," he said slowly. "I forgot that for a while. Got caught up in anger when she killed my goats." He looked down at his hands. "But chaining her like that, watching her cubs crying on the shore, that wasn't the man my father raised." Logan studied the older man's face. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the hunter replied. "Ethan Marshall." "Logan Carter." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Ethan shook it. "What now?" Ethan picked up the bolt cutters and the chains that had nearly killed the bear. "Now I go home and think about what kind of man I want to be." He met Logan's gaze steadily. "And maybe build a better fence around my goat pen." Logan managed a small smile. "That sounds like a good start." As they parted ways, Logan couldn't shake the image of the mother bear's eyes looking into his, wild and fierce, yet somehow connecting with him in a moment of shared vulnerability. He had come to these woods seeking wildlife photographs. Instead, he had found something far more precious, a reminder of the thin line between cruelty and compassion that runs through all hearts, human and animal alike. Back at his campsite, Logan checked his camera. During the chaos, he had inadvertently left it running on the shore. Scrolling through the images, he found several clear shots of the rescue. The bear, struggling in the water, himself and Ethan working together to free her. And finally, the mother bear standing protectively with her cubs before disappearing into the forest. These weren't just photographs. They were evidence of a transformation, not just for the bear who escaped death, but for Ethan who confronted his own capacity for cruelty, and for Logan himself, who discovered courage he never knew he possessed. With trembling fingers, Logan packed his equipment. These images needed to be shared, not as a condemnation of Ethan, who had ultimately chosen compassion over vengeance, but as a testament to the capacity for change that exists in all of us. The possibility that even in our darkest moments we might find the strength to break the chains that bind us to our worst selves. 3 days later, Logan sat in his small apartment, staring at his computer screen. He had spent hours selecting and editing the most powerful images from the bear rescue. The photograph currently displayed showed the moment the mother bear first opened her eyes on the shore, her cubs pressed against her side, with Logan and Ethan standing back in reverent silence. There was something almost sacred about that moment. Predator and prey, human and wild, all boundaries temporarily dissolved in the aftermath of survival. His phone rang, breaking his concentration. The caller ID showed Savannah Reed, his editor at Wildlife Today magazine. "Please tell me you got something amazing in those woods," Savannah said without preamble. "The deadline for our conservation issue is tomorrow, and I've got an empty slot that needs filling." Logan took a deep breath. "I got something, Savannah, but it's not what you're expecting." "Intrigue me," she replied, her interest piqued. "It's about a mother bear who was chained and left to drown, and the man who did it." A long pause followed. "You have photos of animal cruelty." "Logan, that's not really our—" "And the rescue," Logan interrupted. "The transformation. The man who chained her helped me save her. It's a story about redemption, Savannah, about how people can change." Another pause. "Send me what you've got. No promises, but I'll look." Logan attached his best images to an email, along with a draft of the article he'd written describing the experience. His finger hovered over the send button. Something didn't feel right. He had promised Ethan he wouldn't expose him, wouldn't turn this into a public shaming. In the article, he had changed the hunter's name and certain details to protect his identity. But was that enough? Would publishing this story, even with those changes, violate the fragile trust he and Ethan had established? On the other hand, didn't the world need to hear this story, to understand both the cruelty humans were capable of and their capacity for change? With a silent apology to Ethan, Logan hit send. "Got it," Savannah said over the phone. "Give me an hour to review everything." Exactly 58 minutes later, his phone rang again. "This is powerful stuff, Logan," Savannah said, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. The images, especially that final one of the bear looking back before disappearing into the forest, I've never seen anything like it. "So you'll run it?" Logan asked. "We're not just running it, we're making it the cover story." Logan's heart raced with a mixture of pride and trepidation. "That's great, but nothing." "This is Pulitzer material, Logan. It's going to go viral, mark my words." After hanging up, Logan sat in silence, wrestling with his conscience. He had altered names and locations, but anyone local who read the story might recognize Ethan. Was the message worth the potential cost to a man who had, in the end, done the right thing? Too late now, he thought. The story was going to press. 2 weeks later, Logan stood in a convenience store, staring at his own name on the cover of Wildlife Today. The headline read, "Chains of Mercy, when Hunter becomes savior. Beneath it was the haunting image of the mother bear standing with her cubs at the edge of the forest, looking back at the humans who had both harmed and healed her. The magazine had been on newsstands for 3 days, and already Logan's inbox was flooded with interview requests from major news networks. The story had indeed gone viral, sparking intense debates about conservation, hunting ethics, and human-wildlife conflict. Most responses were positive, praising the message of redemption and second chances. But there were also angry voices, particularly from animal rights activists demanding that the hunter be identified and prosecuted. Logan's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the river. Same spot, noon tomorrow. E." His stomach dropped. Ethan had seen the article. The next day, Logan hiked the now familiar trail to the riverbank where the rescue had taken place. The forest seemed different this time, more watchful somehow. When he reached the spot, Ethan was already there, standing at the water's edge with his back to Logan. He wore the same camouflage jacket as before, and Logan couldn't help noticing the rifle slung over his shoulder. "Ethan," Logan called softly, announcing his presence. The older man turned slowly. His weathered face was unreadable. "You changed my name," he said. "I appreciate that, at least." Logan approached cautiously. "I tried to protect your identity. I'm sorry if 3 people have already figured out it was me," Ethan cut in. "Got my first death threat yesterday, anonymous caller. Said anyone who'd chain an animal deserves the same treatment." Logan's heart sank. "I never wanted that. The article wasn't about condemning you. It was about redemption, about how people can change." "Maybe." Ethan looked out across the water. "But people see what they want to see, and right now they see a monster." "What can I do?" Logan asked, genuine concern in his voice. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Nothing. What's done is done." He turned to face Logan fully. "But that's not why I asked you here." "Then why?" "Because they're back." Ethan's voice dropped to a near whisper. "The bear and her cubs. They've been spotted near my property again." Logan's breath caught. "Are they okay?" "The mother's leg is still healing where the chain cut into it. She limps, but she's moving well enough." Ethan hesitated. "But there's a problem. My neighbor Haley Dawson runs the local wildlife rehab center. She says the cubs aren't thriving. The mother's milk has dried up from the stress of the incident." He couldn't quite meet Logan's eyes. "They need help, or they won't survive. Can Haley intervene? Maybe supplement their diet somehow?" Ethan shook his head. "The mother is too protective, won't let anyone near them. Haley says our only option is to tranquilize her and take all 3 into rehabilitation. But that would mean captivity," Logan finished, "after everything she's been through to stay free." "Exactly." Ethan looked troubled. "And I can't be the one to make that call. Not after what I did." Logan understood the unspoken request. Ethan was asking him to decide the bear's fate, to shoulder the responsibility that Ethan felt he had no right to claim. "There might be another option," Logan said slowly. "What if we could help them without capturing them? Create a safe feeding station, somewhere the mother feels secure enough to bring her cubs." Hope flickered across Ethan's face. "It's worth trying. I know these woods better than anyone. I could help find the right location, set everything up." "And I could document it," Logan added. "Show people the next chapter of this story, not just redemption, but restoration." For the first time since they'd met, Ethan smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines etched by years of solitude and bitterness. "I'd like that." Over the next 2 weeks, Logan and Ethan worked tirelessly, tracking the bear family's movements and establishing several feeding stations in areas where the mother seemed comfortable. Haley from the Wildlife Center provided specialized bear formula that would help supplement the cubs' nutrition without making them dependent on human food. They set up motion-activated cameras to monitor the bears' progress without human presence that might stress them. Logan continued to document everything, but this time with Ethan's full consent and collaboration. The tough, isolated hunter proved to have a wealth of knowledge about the local ecosystem, pointing out details about animal behavior that even Logan, with his years of wildlife photography, had never noticed. "My father taught me to observe before hunting," Ethan explained one evening as they reviewed camera footage. "Said, you can't understand an animal just by tracking it. You have to know its habits, its needs, its place in the world." "He sounds like a wise man," Logan replied. "He was." Ethan's eyes grew distant. "After he died, I lost that perspective. Started seeing predators as enemies rather than necessary parts of the balance." He nodded toward the computer screen where the mother bear could be seen cautiously approaching one of their feeding stations. "She reminds me of that balance." The footage showed the bear investigating the supplemental food, then guiding her cubs forward to eat while she stood guard. Day by day, the cubs grew stronger. The mother's limp gradually improved as she healed. Logan and Ethan watched through their remote cameras as the family became healthy again. One morning, Logan arrived at Ethan's cabin to find the hunter in an unusually agitated state. "What's wrong?" Logan asked, setting down his camera bag. "Hunters," Ethan said grimly. "Not locals. A group from out of state. I ran into them setting up camp about 2 miles from here. They're tracking a bear." Logan's stomach dropped. "Our bear?" They didn't say, but they described a female with cubs, and they had pictures of bear tracks with a distinctive pattern. Ethan pointed to a photo on his table. "See that uneven impression on the right hind paw? That's from where the chain cut deepest. Those are her tracks." "Did you tell them about her? About what happened?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I tried. They laughed it off. Called me a tree hugger." A hint of his old anger flashed in his eyes. "These aren't respectful hunters, Logan. They're trophy seekers. They want a bearskin rug and a story to tell their buddies." Logan paced the small cabin. "We have to stop them." "How?" "There's no law against hunting bear in season, which it is right now. They have licenses. I checked." Logan stopped pacing. "Your article," he said suddenly. "Has it been published yet?" "What article?" "The one you were writing for Field and Stream about ethical hunting practices. You mentioned it last week." Understanding dawned on Ethan's face. "It's scheduled for next month, but they've already accepted it." "Why?" "Call your editor. Tell them you want to add a companion piece. About the mother bear we saved, about her cubs depending on her, about how real hunters respect the animals they track." "You think that will stop these guys?" "Not by itself," Logan admitted. "But I have another idea." The next day, a local news crew arrived at the edge of the forest. Savannah Reed had pulled some strings at Wildlife Today, and the story of the rehabilitated bear family had caught the attention of regional media. With Ethan's permission, Logan shared their footage of the bear's recovery and explained the threat posed by the trophy hunters. "This mother bear has already survived an unimaginable ordeal," Logan told the cameras. "She's not just any bear. She's become a symbol of resilience and the complex relationship between humans and wildlife. Her cubs depend on her. Hunting her now would undo all the healing that's taken place, both for her and for the community." To Logan's surprise, Ethan stepped forward to join him on camera. "As a lifelong hunter, I believe in respecting the animals we share these woods with." he said, his voice steady despite his obvious discomfort with the attention. There's a difference between hunting for sustenance or necessary population control and killing for a trophy. This bear and her cubs deserve protection. The reporter turned to the camera. You heard it here first. An unlikely alliance between a wildlife photographer and a hunter, working together to protect a bear family that has captured hearts across the country. State wildlife officials say they are exploring options for providing special protected status for this particular bear family, given their unique circumstances. After the news crew left, Logan turned to Ethan. You didn't have to do that, put yourself out there like that. Ethan shrugged. Maybe I did. Maybe it's time I stood for something. That evening, they received word that the trophy hunters had packed up and moved on, unwilling to face the public scrutiny that would come from hunting such a well-publicized bear. Furthermore, the state wildlife department had fast-tracked a special protection order for the bear family, designating them as subjects of an ongoing wildlife rehabilitation study. As Logan and Ethan sat by the river, watching the sunset paint the water gold, a rustling in the underbrush caught their attention. Both men froze as the mother bear emerged from the trees, her cubs following close behind. She stopped about 30 feet away, watching them calmly. The cubs, growing stronger and more playful each day, wrestled with each other at her feet. She's not afraid of us anymore, Logan whispered. No, Ethan agreed, but she's still wild, as she should be. The mother bear studied them for a long moment, her intelligent eyes seemingly taking their measure. Then, with a soft huff that sounded almost like acknowledgement, she turned and led her cubs back into the protective shadows of the forest. Logan raised his camera and captured one last image, the silhouette of the bear family against the sunset, heading toward a future that was once again full of possibility. It wasn't a perfect ending. The bears would face other challenges. Ethan would continue to navigate the consequences of his past actions and new public identity. Logan's photographs would keep telling their evolving story. But for now, in this moment, the chains of the past had been broken. The river flowed on, bearing away old sins and bringing new chances. And 3 lives, the hunter, the photographer, and the bear, remained connected by an experience that had transformed them all. The story continued to ripple outward in the weeks that followed. Savannah featured the new developments in a follow-up article, which caught the attention of a major documentary filmmaker. Suddenly, Logan found himself with funding to create a feature-length film about the bear's ongoing recovery and the unlikely friendship between himself and Ethan. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where Haley worked received an influx of donations, enough to expand their facilities and launch new educational programs about human-wildlife conflict resolution. Ethan, despite his initial reluctance, became a popular speaker at conservation events, sharing his journey from anger to understanding. His perspective as a hunter who had found a new relationship with the natural world offered a unique bridge between traditionally opposed viewpoints. I never wanted to be a public figure, he confided to Logan one day as they tracked the bear family through fresh snow. But if my story helps other people see differently, then maybe that's my purpose now. Logan nodded, understanding. His own life had changed dramatically as well. His bear photographs had won several prestigious awards, opening doors to conservation photography projects around the world. Yet he found himself continually drawn back to these woods, to this story that seemed to have no ending, only new chapters. "Do you regret it?" Logan asked suddenly. "Chaining her that day?" Ethan was quiet for a long time, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I regret the hatred I carried," he finally said. The chain was just a manifestation of that. But without that moment, without hitting bottom, I might never have found my way back. He looked at Logan. Do you regret publishing the story? Logan considered the question. No, he said at last. But I regret not trusting you with the decision. I should have asked first. We both made mistakes, Ethan said. The difference is what we do after. As if to emphasize his point, they crested a small hill and spotted the bear family in the valley below. The cubs, significantly larger now, romped in the fresh snow while their mother watched attentively. Her injured leg had healed enough that she barely favored it anymore. She had regained her full strength, her coat glossy and thick for the approaching winter. They stood watching the bears for nearly an hour, neither man speaking. There was no need for words. The real story was unfolding before them, not just of survival, but of thriving. Not just of breaking chains, but of what becomes possible in their absence. As the first snowflakes of a new storm began to fall, the mother bear gathered her cubs with a soft grunt. She paused, lifting her nose to test the wind. For a brief moment she looked directly up the hill to where Logan and Ethan stood. There was no fear in her gaze, no lingering trauma. Only a wild intelligence that seemed to recognize them without surrendering any of her essential nature. Then she turned away, leading her family deeper into the forest as the snow swirled around them, gradually erasing their tracks until it seemed they had never been there at all. Except in the memories of those whose lives they had changed forever. Logan raised his camera one last time, capturing not just the image of the departing bears, but the truth they represented, that redemption is never a destination but a journey, ongoing and unfinished. That healing comes not from forgetting our wounds but from carrying them forward with new purpose, and that sometimes the most powerful bonds are formed in the moment when we recognize ourselves in the eyes of another being, even one as different from us as a wild bear fighting for her life in a river that nearly became her grave. 6 months passed. Winter released its grip on the forest, giving way to the vibrant renewal of spring. Logan's documentary, Breaking Chains, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival to critical acclaim. Ethan had reluctantly attended the premiere, uncomfortable in his suit and with the attention, but proud of the story they had told together. They had managed to capture extraordinary footage of the bear family throughout winter, showing how the mother had successfully denned with her cubs and emerged in spring with both young ones healthy and thriving. The film's success brought Logan opportunities he'd never dreamed possible, offers from National Geographic, BBC Wildlife, and other prestigious outlets. His calendar filled with assignments around the world. Yet he found himself turning down more offers than he accepted, drawn back repeatedly to the forest where it had all begun, to the ongoing story of one bear family and the man who had nearly destroyed them. On a warm morning in late May, Logan hiked the familiar trail to Ethan's cabin. They had planned to check the most recent camera footage of the bears, who had established a territory approximately 3 miles from Ethan's property. The cubs, now yearlings, were growing rapidly, learning to forage and developing the skills they would need when they eventually left their mother. As the cabin came into view, Logan noticed something was wrong. Ethan's truck was parked at an odd angle, the driver's door hanging open. Tools and supplies were scattered across the yard as if dropped in haste. Most concerning, Ethan's hunting dogs, 2 well-trained bloodhounds named Buck and Scout, were pacing anxiously by the tree line, whining but not barking. "Ethan," Logan called, approaching cautiously. The dogs ran to him, circling his legs with clear agitation. "Ethan, you here?" No answer came from the cabin. Logan checked inside, empty, with a half-finished cup of coffee on the table, suggesting Ethan had left suddenly. A creeping sense of dread filled Logan's chest. He grabbed his phone to call Ethan but found no signal, as was common in this remote area. That's when he noticed the note pinned to the cabin door, hastily scrawled in Ethan's handwriting. Poachers in North Quadrant. Heard shots. Going to investigate. Call Ranger Station. Logan's heart sank. The North Quadrant was where the Bear family had last been seen on their cameras. Poachers hunting out of season were a growing problem in the area. Emboldened by the remote terrain and limited enforcement resources. And despite the special protected status of the mother bear and her cubs, not everyone respected or even knew about those designations. Without hesitation, Logan grabbed Ethan's spare rifle from the cabin wall. Though not a hunter himself, Logan had learned basic firearm safety from Ethan over the past months. He didn't intend to use the weapon, but its presence might deter poachers if confronted. He also took a first aid kit, water, and a handheld radio tuned to the emergency frequency used by the forest rangers. "Buck, Scout, find Ethan," Logan commanded. The dogs immediately put their noses to the ground, picking up their master's scent. They led Logan into the forest at a brisk pace, heading northwest. After nearly an hour of difficult hiking, the dogs' behavior changed. They grew agitated, circling a small clearing and whining softly. Logan scanned the area and spotted disturbed ground, broken branches, and what appeared to be blood on several leaves. "Ethan," he called again, his voice echoing through the trees. Only birdsong answered. The dogs continued forward, more cautious now. Another 15 minutes of tracking brought them to the edge of a steep ravine. The ground here showed signs of a struggle, disturbed earth, snapped twigs, and a clear impression where someone had slid or fallen down the incline. With growing dread, Logan carefully made his way down the ravine, the dogs following close behind. At the bottom, beside a small stream, he found Ethan. The older man lay motionless, his left leg bent at an unnatural angle. Blood had soaked through his shirt on the right side, where what appeared to be a bullet graze had torn the fabric. His face was pale beneath his weathered tan, but a faint rise and fall of his chest confirmed he was alive. "Ethan!" Logan rushed to his side, dropping to his knees. "Can you hear me?" Ethan's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as he recognized Logan. "They shot her," he whispered, his voice ragged with pain and emotion. "The mother bear, I tried to stop them." Ice filled Logan's veins. "Is she dead?" "Don't know." Ethan winced as he tried to move. "She ran off. Cubs scattered. There were 3 of them, the poachers. They fired at me when I confronted them. I fell, think my leg's broken." Logan quickly assessed Ethan's injuries. The bullet had only grazed his side, but the leg was definitely broken, and Ethan was showing signs of shock. He wouldn't be walking out of here. "I need to get help," Logan said, pulling out the radio. He tried several channels but received only static. The ravine's steep walls blocked the signal. "Go," Ethan urged, gripping Logan's arm with surprising strength. "Find her. The bear, make sure she's okay. I'll be fine here." "I can't just leave you," Logan protested. "You can, and you will." Ethan's voice gained conviction despite his pain. "My dogs will stay with me, but she's out there wounded, and those bastards might still be tracking her. Go." Logan hesitated, torn between helping his friend and finding the bear. But the determination in Ethan's eyes made the decision for him. He left Ethan with the first aid kit, the rifle, and the dogs. After making the injured man as comfortable as possible, Logan marked the location on his GPS and continued deeper into the forest, following the faint trail of blood droplets that could only belong to the wounded bear. The trail led him farther north, into a densely wooded area he and Ethan had rarely explored. The blood signs grew more frequent, suggesting the bear was slowing down, weakening. Logan moved as quickly as he dared, listening for any sound that might indicate the poachers were still in pursuit. After another hour of tracking, he froze at the sound of voices ahead. Crouching low, Logan crept forward until he could make out 3 men in a small clearing. One held a rifle with a scope, the others carried handguns. At their feet lay a dead deer, illegal to hunt this time of year. They were arguing in low, heated voices. "We should have finished it off," one said. "Wounded bears are dangerous." "Did you see the size of that thing?" Another countered. "Besides, Marshall showed up. We're lucky we got away." "You think he saw our faces?" asked the third, nervousness evident in his tone. "Doesn't matter," said the first man. "No one's going to believe a crazy old hunter who chains bears for fun." Logan's blood ran cold. These men knew who Ethan was, knew about his past with the bear. The story had spread further than they'd realized. "What about the photographer?" the nervous one asked. "The one who made that movie? What about him?" "We're miles from where they usually track that bear. No cameras out here. By the time anyone finds the body, we'll be long gone." The casual way they'd discussed the bear's death tightened Logan's chest with anger. These weren't hunters. They were killers who took pleasure in destruction. And they had no remorse about shooting at Ethan or leaving a wounded animal to suffer. Logan needed evidence of their crimes. Moving with extreme caution, he positioned himself behind a fallen log and raised his camera. Through the telephoto lens, he captured clear images of the men with their illegal kill, their weapons, and their faces. If he could get this to the authorities, they would have enough for arrests. As he took the photos, one of the men suddenly stiffened and looked in Logan's direction. "Did you hear that?" Logan froze, barely breathing. He had made no sound that he was aware of. The man raised his rifle, scanning the trees. "Something's out there." A low growl from behind Logan made his heart stop. Slowly, he turned his head to find himself staring into the eyes of the mother bear, not 10 feet away. Blood matted her fur where a bullet had grazed her shoulder, but she stood strong and alert, her attention fixed on the poachers beyond Logan's position. For an eternal moment, Logan and the bear regarded each other in silent recognition. There was no fear in her gaze as she looked at him, only a focused intensity as she assessed the greater threat ahead. 2 of her yearling cubs appeared behind her, staying close to their mother but watching Logan warily. The bear looked from Logan to the poachers and back again, as if making a decision. Then, with deliberate care, she moved past him, giving him a wide berth as she positioned herself between her cubs and the armed men. Logan held his breath, understanding the profound trust the bear had just demonstrated. She had recognized him as something other than a threat, perhaps even as an ally, and now she was preparing to defend her family against the real danger. One of the poachers spotted her. "There she is," he shouted, raising his rifle. Without thinking, Logan burst from cover. "Stop!" he yelled. "This bear is protected by state law." The men wheeled. In surprise, weapons now trained on Logan. Recognition dawned on the face of the lead poacher. "You're that photographer, the one from the documentary. And you're trespassing in a wildlife study area, hunting out of season, and targeting a protected animal," Logan replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I've already photographed you with your illegal kill. The game wardens are on their way." This last part was a bluff, but the poachers exchanged nervous glances. The mother bear used their distraction to herd her cubs backward into denser cover, placing herself between them and the hunters. "Give me the camera," the leader demanded, taking a step toward Logan. "No one needs to get hurt here." "Too late for that," Logan replied, nodding toward the injured bear and thinking of Ethan lying in the ravine. "You've done enough damage." The tension was broken by a new sound, the distinctive whop 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 of helicopter blades. All eyes turned skyward as a Forest Service helicopter appeared above the tree line. "Impossible," muttered one of the poachers. "How could they—" His question was cut short by the arrival of 4 forest rangers bursting into the clearing, weapons drawn. "Game warden, drop your weapons," shouted the light officer, a stern-faced woman with a nameplate reading Ranger Morgan. The poachers, outnumbered and caught red-handed, slowly placed their guns on the ground. As the rangers secured the men, Lily Morgan approached Logan. "Mr. Carter, we got an emergency call from a hiker who heard gunshots. Said they saw a man matching your description heading into this area." She glanced at the retreating form of the mother bear, now barely visible in the underbrush. "Is that the protected sow from the sanctuary?" "Yes," Logan confirmed. "She's been shot but seems mobile. And Ethan Marshall is injured about 2 miles south of here. Broken leg, possible gunshot wound. He needs medical attention immediately." Ranger Morgan nodded briskly, speaking into her radio to coordinate a rescue for Ethan. "And you?" she asked Logan. "Are you hurt?" "No," Logan said, suddenly feeling the adrenaline crash as his hands began to shake. "But I need to make sure the bear is okay. She and her cubs, we have a wildlife veterinarian on standby," Morgan assured him. "Dr. Bennett is our best. If that bear needs treatment, he'll find a way to help her without adding to her trauma." As the rangers led the poachers away, Logan sat heavily on a fallen log, the enormity of what had just happened washing over him. He had faced armed poachers. Ethan had been shot trying to protect the bear. And that same bear, an animal who had every reason to fear and hate humans, had recognized him and made a conscious choice to trust his presence. The next few hours passed in a blur. A rescue team airlifted Ethan to the nearest hospital. Ranger Morgan took Logan's statement and his camera's memory card as evidence. Dr. Jacob Bennett, the wildlife veterinarian, organized a team to track and assess the injured mother bear. By nightfall, Logan found himself in the hospital waiting room, exhausted but unable to rest, until he heard news about both Ethan and the bear. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from Savannah and the documentary team, all wanting updates on the situation. Logan had shared only minimal details, unwilling to sensationalize what had happened before he knew the outcomes. A doctor eventually emerged to inform him that Ethan was out of surgery. The bullet graze had been minor, but his leg required pins and a lengthy recovery period. He was sedated but stable, and Logan could see him briefly. Ethan looked small in the hospital bed, his usual vibrant energy dimmed by medication and trauma. His eyes fluttered open as Logan approached. "The bear?" he asked immediately, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Alive," Logan assured him. "Dr. Bennett found her and the cubs in a cave about a mile from where I last saw them. The bullet didn't hit anything vital. He was able to treat her with a long-distance tranquilizer and antibiotics." Relief washed over Ethan's weathered face. "And the poachers?" "In custody. Multiple charges. With my photos and the evidence at the scene, they won't be hunting anything for a very long time." Ethan nodded, his eyelids growing heavy as the medication pulled him back toward sleep. "You did good," he murmured. "We both did." As Ethan drifted off, Logan sat beside his bed, reflecting on how far they had come from their first hostile encounter. The man who had once chained a bear to drown had nearly given his life to protect her. The bear, who had every reason to attack any human on sight, had shown discernment and trust, and Logan himself had found courage he never knew he possessed. Over the following weeks, the story of the poaching incident and rescue spread, amplified by the success of Logan's documentary. Ethan's role in protecting the bear transformed his public image from reformed villain to wildlife hero. Letters and donations poured in to support his recovery and the expansion of the wildlife sanctuary around his property. Logan used his growing platform to advocate for stronger poaching penalties and better funding for wildlife protection services. The film of the mother bear demonstrating trust by walking past him to confront the poachers became iconic footage in conservation circles, proof of the complex intelligence and emotional capacity of these animals. Dr. Bennett continued to monitor the bear family from a respectful distance. The mother's wound healed completely, leaving only a small bare patch in her fur as evidence of what had happened. Her cubs, now nearly grown, showed increasing independence, but remained within her territory. 3 months after the incident, Ethan was released from rehabilitation, able to walk with a cane but determined to regain his full mobility. His first request was to visit the observation blind he and Logan had constructed near the bear's favorite meadow. It was a perfect autumn afternoon when Logan drove Ethan to the trailhead. The forest blazed with red and gold leaves, and the air carried the crisp scent of the coming winter. The hike to the blind was slow with Ethan's injury, but the older man refused any offer of additional help, stubbornly making his way along the familiar path. "Some things you have to do for yourself," he explained, his breath forming small clouds in the cooling air, "makes them mean more." When they finally reached the blind, a small, camouflaged shelter constructed to allow observation without disturbing wildlife, they settled in to wait. Logan set up his camera while Ethan scanned the meadow with binoculars. Hours passed in comfortable silence. The afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the open space before them. Logan was about to suggest they head back before darkness made the return journey more difficult, when Ethan suddenly gripped his arm. "Look," he whispered, pointing. The mother bear emerged from the trees at the far edge of the meadow. She moved with the confident grace of a fully healed predator, her brown fur gleaming in the low sunlight. Behind her came only one yearling cub, now nearly as large as she was. "Where's the other cub?" Logan asked, adjusting his camera to capture the pair. "Watch," Ethan replied softly. As if on cue, a second large shape appeared from a different section of the forest. The other yearling, now moving independently of its mother and sibling. The young bear approached cautiously, greeting its family with gentle huffs before all three began foraging in the meadow grasses. "They're growing up," Logan observed. "Starting to separate." Ethan nodded, a complex emotion in his eyes. "Natural process. They'll leave her completely by next spring. Start their own lives, their own territories." He watched the bears with a mixture of pride and melancholy. Freedom means letting go sometimes. The mother bear suddenly lifted her head, testing the air. She looked directly toward the blind where Logan and Ethan sat motionless. For a breathtaking moment it seemed she stared into their eyes across the distance, acknowledging their presence without alarm. Then she returned to her foraging, unconcerned. "She knows we're here," Ethan said quietly. "Has for a while, I'd guess. She's chosen to accept us." Logan captured the scene with his camera, not just the bears and their natural behavior, but also Ethan's weathered profile as he watched them, the lines of his face softened by something that looked remarkably like love. "You know," Logan said, lowering his camera, "when I first found you with that chained bear, I thought I understood what was happening. Good versus evil. Cruelty versus compassion. But it wasn't that simple, was it?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "Nothing ever is, son. Life tangles things up, makes monsters and heroes out of the same clay." He gestured toward the bears. "Look at her. By all rights, she should hate every human she sees. Instead, she's found a way to move beyond what was done to her. She's had good experiences since then, Logan pointed out. Reasons to trust again. Yes. Ethan's voice grew thoughtful. But she had to be willing to accept those experiences, to risk believing that not every encounter would end in chains. He tapped his injured leg gently. Some lessons come harder than others. As darkness settled over the forest, they packed their equipment and began the careful journey back. The mother bear and her cubs had disappeared back into the trees, continuing their wild lives beyond human observation. Near the trailhead, they paused to rest, looking back at the darkening forest. Somewhere in those depths, a once chained bear roamed free, carrying the marks of human cruelty but also the memory of human redemption. "Do you ever regret it?" Logan asked suddenly. "Getting involved with her again after everything? Risking your life?" Ethan considered the question, leaning on his cane as he gazed into the gathering shadows. "My father used to say that at the end of your life, you don't regret the things that scarred you. You regret the wounds you walked away from, the ones you could have helped heal but didn't." He turned to Logan, his face serious in the fading light. "I chained her out of hatred and fear. I freed her out of duty and shame, but I protected her out of love. That's the journey that matters." As they made their final steps toward the waiting truck, a lone howl echoed through the forest behind them. Not a bear's sound, but a wolf's call, wild and free. It seemed a fitting epilogue to their story, a reminder that beyond human drama, the forest continued its ancient rhythms. That healing was possible. That chains, both literal and metaphorical, could be broken. The mother bear would continue raising her cubs until they were ready for independence. The forest would continue its cycles of growth and rest. Ethan would heal and find new purpose in protecting what he once sought to destroy. Logan would tell their story through images that bridge the gap between human and wild. And somewhere in that ongoing dance between civilization and wilderness, a space had been created where understanding might grow, a fragile, precious link, as tenuous yet powerful as the moment when a wounded bear chose to trust the very species that had both harmed and healed her. As Logan drove them back toward town, the headlights cutting through the gathering darkness, he realized that their story had no true ending. Like the forest itself, it would continue evolving, growing in unexpected directions. New challenges would arise. New wounds would need healing. But the chains of the past had been broken, creating space for possibilities neither man could have imagined on that fateful day by the river. The road ahead curved through the trees, leading back to the human world with all its complexities and contradictions. But something essential had been transformed, in Ethan, in Logan, and perhaps even in the bear they had both helped to save. A connection had been forged that transcended the natural boundaries between species, between hunter and hunted, between past mistakes and future redemption. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Real healing never is. But it was a beginning, of understanding, of respect, of the recognition that even in our most wounded moments, something new and unexpected can emerge. Something that, like a once-chained bear now running free through moonlit forests, reminds us that our stories need not be defined by our darkest chapters, and that, both men knew without speaking it aloud, was worth every scar they carried. 5 years later, Logan stood at the edge of a different forest, camera in hand. His documentary series on wildlife conservation had taken him around the world, from the rainforests of Borneo to the savannas of Africa. But today, he had returned home for a special occasion. The rehabilitation center that Haley Dawson had once operated from a small building had grown into the Marshall Carter Wildlife Sanctuary, a sprawling facility dedicated to treating injured wildlife and educating the public about conservation. Today was its official opening ceremony, and a crowd had gathered beneath a banner reading, "Breaking Chains, Building Bridges." Ethan, now in his 60s but standing straight without his cane, moved among the visitors with surprising ease. The years had softened him further. His once stern face now relaxed into the natural smiles that came with finding his purpose. He spent most days guiding school groups through the sanctuary's educational trails, teaching children about respecting wildlife and finding balance with the natural world. "There he is," Ethan called, spotting Logan, the man who captured it all. They embraced like father and son, bound by experiences few others could understand. "How does it feel?" Logan asked, gesturing to the sanctuary around them. "Seeing your name up there?" Ethan shook his head with characteristic humility. "Names don't matter much. It's what we do that counts." He looked around at the visitors exploring the sanctuary. Every child who leaves here understanding wild animals a little better. That's what matters. They walked together toward the ceremony stage, where Savannah Reed waited to begin the proceedings. Along the path were enlarged photographs from Logan's collection, images telling the story that had started it all. The mother bear chained in the river, the dramatic rescue, the healing and growth that followed. "Have you been back to see them?" Ethan asked quietly. Logan nodded. "Last month. The cubs are fully grown now, with territories of their own." He smiled at the memory. "She recognized me, Ethan, I'm certain of it. Stood at the edge of a clearing and watched me for almost 10 minutes before moving on. No fear? None, just acknowledgement." They paused before the final photograph in the series, the image Logan had taken on their last day together at the observation blind. The mother bear stood in golden afternoon light, her face turned directly toward the camera as if in deliberate connection with the viewer. "Doctor, Bennett says she's had 2 more litters since then," Ethan said, "teaching her cubs the same territory, the same survival skills." He touched the photograph gently. "And maybe something else, too. Something about discernment, about knowing the difference between those who would harm and those who would help." As they took their places for the ceremony, a group of schoolchildren pressed eagerly around a display where Ranger Lily Morgan was explaining wildlife tracking techniques. Their faces shone with wonder and curiosity, the next generation of potential protectors for the wilderness and its inhabitants. When it was Logan's turn to speak, he looked out at the gathered crowd, rangers, conservationists, local families, and a few journalists capturing the moment for wider audiences. "Many of you know our story," he began. "A story that started with cruelty and nearly ended in tragedy. A story about a bear in chains and the humans who both harmed and healed her. But what you might not understand is that this was never just about saving one bear, or redeeming one man, or even about creating this sanctuary." Logan paused, gathering his thoughts. The mother bear could have chosen hatred. After being chained and nearly drowned, she could have spent her life attacking humans on sight, teaching her cubs to fear and hate us. Ethan, after realizing the wrong he had done, could have hidden in shame or denied his actions. I could have used my camera only to condemn, not to understand. The crowd listened in silence, captivated. But instead, we all chose a harder path. The path of healing. The path that acknowledges pain but refuses to be defined by it. The path that recognizes we are all, humans and animals alike, capable of both terrible cruelty and extraordinary compassion. Logan gestured to the sanctuary around them. "This place exists because we discovered something profound in our journey with that mother bear. We discovered that the chains we place on others, whether literal metal links or the invisible bonds of prejudice, anger, and fear, end up binding us as well, and that the act of breaking those chains frees not just those we have harmed, but ourselves. He looked at Ethan, who nodded in silent understanding. The most important lesson from our story isn't that humans should protect wildlife, though we absolutely should. It's that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds, that trust can be rebuilt even after the most terrible betrayals, that we are never defined by our worst moments unless we choose to be. Logan's voice grew stronger, more passionate. That mother bear had every reason to hate humans forever. But when the moment came, when she found herself wounded and facing poachers with me caught in between, she chose discernment over blind hatred. She recognized that not all humans were the same, that some could be trusted, even after what she had endured. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. If a wild animal can learn that lesson, can find the wisdom to judge each being on their own actions rather than on past trauma, then surely we humans can do the same. With each other, with other species, with ourselves. Logan looked out at the children in the crowd, their young faces serious and attentive. The chains we need to break aren't always made of metal. Sometimes they're made of anger or fear or the belief that people cannot change. Sometimes the heaviest chains are the ones we place on ourselves, the ones that tell us we are defined forever by our worst mistakes. He gestured to the photograph of the mother bear. She carries the scars of what was done to her. Ethan carries the memory of what he once did. I carry the knowledge of how close we came to losing something precious. But none of us are chained by those things anymore. We have all chosen freedom, not by forgetting, but by forgiving, not by denying the past, but by refusing to let it determine our future. As Logan concluded his speech, a ranger hurried toward the stage, excitement evident in her face. She whispered something to Ethan, whose eyes widened. He interrupted the proceedings with an announcement that sent a ripple of excitement through the crowd. For those who would like to see something remarkable, please move quietly to the north observation deck. It seems we have an unexpected visitor. The crowd followed Ethan and Logan to a large deck overlooking a wooded ravine at the edge of the sanctuary property. There, at the tree line, stood an older female bear, graying slightly around the muzzle but still powerful and majestic. She watched the gathering of humans with alert but calm interest. "It's her," Logan whispered, recognition immediate. "But we're miles from her usual territory." Ethan's weathered face broke into a smile of wonder. "She came for the opening." Though Logan knew the scientific part of his mind should reject such a fanciful notion, something deeper recognized the truth of it. Whether drawn by curiosity, some mysterious sense of the significance of this day, or simply by chance, the mother bear had appeared at precisely this moment, a living embodiment of the story they had just shared. The children whispered excitedly, pointing but remembering the ranger's instructions to stay quiet. Parents lifted smaller children for a better view. Cameras clicked softly as people captured the moment. For several minutes, the bear remained at the edge of the trees, her intelligent eyes taking in the scene before her. Then, with deliberate calm, she turned and disappeared back into the forest that was her true home. In that moment, everyone present understood the lesson without it needing to be explained further. They had witnessed something profound, a wild animal choosing to acknowledge human presence without fear, a boundary crossed not through force or captivity but through mutual respect. As the crowd dispersed, talking excitedly about what they had seen, Logan and Ethan remained at the railing, looking out at the empty space where the bear had stood. "Do you think she really knew?" Logan asked quietly. About today, about what we're doing here. Ethan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I think, he said slowly, that there are connections in this world we don't fully understand. Between all living things. Between past and present. Between harm and healing. He placed his hand on Logan's shoulder. We named this place Breaking Chains because we wanted people to remember how our story began. But maybe the real miracle isn't in the breaking of chains, but in what happens after. What do you mean? Logan asked. I mean that breaking chains is just the beginning. It's necessary, but not sufficient. The true miracle comes when the once chained bear chooses to return, not out of fear or force, but because something new has been created in the space where chains once were. Something like trust or forgiveness, or maybe even something like love. As they walked back toward the celebration, surrounded by the sounds of people learning and connecting with the natural world, Logan understood that their story had never really been about the dramatic rescue of a chained bear. That was just the beginning. The true story, the one that would continue long after they were gone, was about what happens after the chains fall away. About the courage it takes to trust again after betrayal. About the wisdom to discern friend from foe. About the healing that becomes possible when we refuse to be defined by our wounds. It was a story without an ending, passed now to each person who visited the sanctuary, to each child who learned about conservation, to each animal that found refuge in these protected spaces. A story about the remarkable resilience of life and the endless capacity for renewal that exists in every heart, human and wild alike. And in that ongoing story, a once chained mother bear would always stand as testament to the most profound truth of all, that freedom is not merely the absence of chains, but the courage to move beyond them, to forge connections where once there were only barriers, to create meaning from suffering, to transform wounds into wisdom. That was the truest breaking of chains. And it would continue in countless unseen ways, rippling outward from this place and these moments into a future where humans and wildlife might find ways to coexist with greater understanding and respect. A future worth every scar along the way.